Restart. Hey friends, it's Jasmine, and I hope that you all are doing well. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I am a witchy content creator here on YouTube and several other platforms as well. So if you're into things like witchcraft, paranormal investigating, you should check out my links down below in the description. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for coming back. It's really good to see your face. So I've kind of been debating for a little while on how exactly I wanted to kind of make this video and how I wanted to talk about this, because this is something that's definitely been kind of developing for myself as a witch. And I would say the past year and a half, 2 years of just kind of building this sort of relationship. And that relationship would be with
the witch's devil.
The witch's devil to me has kind of become this focal point in a way in my practice, in a way that I really didn't necessarily foresee for myself. You know, if you had talked to me 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have resonated the same way that I do now, but I also have a very different understanding now than I did then. And I think that that's something important when it comes to your witchcraft practice, is that, in my opinion, a healthy practice is a practice that is living and evolves and changes with you as you develop in your path. And I am someone who, you know, early, I would say in my witchcraft background, like there's been a lot of sort of just folk magic, you know, whether that be more ancestral folk magic or whether that be more geographic folk magic, and even a little bit of mixture of both. And I've kind of shared some of that here on my channel. When my witchcraft practice started to really kind of formalize in a way, this would have been like in my early 20s, I very much so subscribed to this idea of like eclectic Wicca. But I mostly subscribed to the idea of eclectic Wicca because I didn't really know that there were other paths. Like, Wicca was the path in the mainstream. And, you know, there was your Gardnerians, there was your Alexandrians, there was like your Dianic groups. There was kind of different subsects. And my witchcraft practice as a trans woman and as a queer person is very much shaped by that, in the sense that that's how I perceive the world. And so some of the like Wiccan aspects of like this triple goddess, this horned god, just really didn't speak to me and really didn't resonate with me at all. Like they felt like very harsh binaries, which if that's your jam, like I have no issue with Wiccans. So please don't take this as like I'm shitting on Wicca. Appreciate Wicca, because I feel like my practice literally would not be what it is today without my experiences in Wicca. For a little while in my practice, I also kind of started getting interested in like Thelema, and maybe particularly walking down like that path. And there are still some aspects of Thelema that I really, really enjoy, like Babylon, for example, the Scarlet Woman, the Sacred Whore, the New Aeon, the Baphomet Child. Like, I think that that's fascinating, and it definitely resonates with my spirit. And I think that when you're walking your path, one of the best things you can do is to really try to listen to what your spirits are guiding you through and leading you through, as opposed to just doing something simply because this is how it's done. And early in my witchcraft practice, that was very much what I felt like I had to do, was what was done, as opposed to really critically thinking about like, why are we doing this to begin with? And I promise all of this will lead into talking more about the witch's devil, but I have to kind of give you a little bit of this background stuff like first. I remember when I was first setting up like my official altar, because prior really to Wicca, I don't think I necessarily really recognized altars in the same way that I do now. I definitely had like magical tools and like folk magic objects, that were sacred to me, but there wasn't necessarily like one specific place in my home that I really like utilized. And of course, growing up, that offers its own set of challenges with living with family. So when I kind of moved out and I had my own space and I was really able to create my own space the way that I needed it to be, that's really what opened it up for me to really start making sacred space, right? Because it's kind of hard to do that when you're living with your parents and you just have your room. Prior to living in the house that I live in now, that has multiple bedrooms, that's rather spacious, I would say, for us. We've lived in townhouses, we've lived in studios, we've lived in 1-bedroom apartments, 2-bedroom apartments, 2-bedroom townhomes. Like, we have definitely moved, and that's also changed my practice and offered its own set of challenges as well. It was only in, I would say, the past 4 years or so that I started to really feel rooted in the space that I was living in. I wouldn't have thought that we were even going to stay in the house that we were renting, but we've lived here now for 5 years. Having that sort of consistent root definitely helped develop my practice in ways that I wasn't really able to connect with the land and work with the spirits of the land and really feel firm in my foundations in the same way when I was moving every single year. I remember setting up those first altars of mine, some of which you can probably go back and even see on my channel. Some of the stuff in those videos has drastically, completely changed. 100%. Like, I don't do that at all anymore. And some of the things in those videos, like my sabbatical altars, I still do. I still observe the Wheel of the Year. I still observe 8 Sabbats. And I have an altar in my living room that I call my sabbatical altar that I designate specifically for that. Oh, knocking over my tripod. I used to try to kind of represent the Sabbats on my working altar, but I just found that that was too much for the space that I had available. So now I have my working altar here in my witchy room, or my home office, which, let me know if you're interested in maybe like a witchy room tour. I've never really done that in here. I have a couple of devotional shrines in here to different goddesses, and then I have my working altar where I work at, whether it's reading cards or casting spells. I'm physically actually doing work. It's not just a pretty table set up. And then my sabbatical altar is definitely kind of like more representational of the specific season of the wheel that we are in. And I might do some workings there, but they'll probably be more specific to the season that we are in, as opposed to just kind of my regular daily folk practice. So going back to Wicca, right? And going back to kind of my entry into a more organized system of witchcraft that is not just an eclectic folk practice, which there's nothing wrong with that. Please don't take it as I'm saying there's anything wrong with that, because there isn't. But I was looking for more structure. I was looking for a more organized way of practicing. And so Wicca was available. I don't want to necessarily say that
Wicca was my gateway drug to witchcraft.
I remember reading some of these books and being basically told, here's exactly how you set up your altar. You have to have these different representations of these 4 elements. You need to have one side of it for your goddess, one side of it for the god. You need to have a matron and patron deity. It needs to be very split down the middle based upon gender, with your cauldron and your chalice and your athame and your wand. You need to have your altar disc. There were all these very Wiccan aspects to my early altars that I just kind of did because that's just what you did, right? Like, I didn't really think much about it other than, wow, this is neat, this is cool, this is offering me an organized system of magic, and I'm excited about it, so I'm going to do it as I'm being told. And the more I actually started working that system, the more I realized, shockingly, that this is so not for me. And I really battled with that a lot. Like, why is this not working for me? And then like almost kind of questioning my witchhood, in the sense that I really wanted this to work. I really tried to be like a good Wiccan, and it just wasn't the vibe for me. Like I said, I have nothing against Wiccans at all. And there's plenty of my practice that has been shaped by Wicca. And I don't have any issue with that, because I don't have a problem necessarily with Wicca. It just wasn't the path for me. This horned god that is sort of kind of put as this focal point in Wicca. I mean, you have the goddess worship for sure, but equal to that, there's this god aspect. And the divine masculine has been something that for me, I have personally just not really resonated with. And it's taken a lot of introspection. It's taken a lot of shadow work to really sit with that and be like, okay, what part of the divine masculine are you not connecting with? And also, is it a problem that I'm not connecting with the divine masculine? Because I wasn't necessarily sure it was a problem. And I don't believe now that it necessarily is either. I'm definitely a goddess focused person. I'm a very femme queer person. So it doesn't shock me. But there's also systems of magic that say, you know, very feminine people should work with masculine gods and masculine spirits and making pacts with more Mars-like planetary energy because that offers the contrariness of it all. And then, you know, like masculine people should really work with more feminine spirits. There's like that whole aspect of Thelema. And so I tried to work that too, thinking, okay, maybe if I go like this hyper masculine Wiccan horned god of like virility, that it'll start clicking for me, even though that's kind of the polar opposite of my sort of energy. Maybe that's what I need to like balance out myself and my practice. That did not work for me either. And so I kind of started leaning more into Dianic Wicca, more of this goddess-centered, goddess-focused path. And there are beautiful things about that too. Unfortunately, there's also very turfy aspects of that, which if you don't know TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminism, there's some very problematic aspects within Dianic spaces, especially for people like me, women like me who are trans, who are kind of made to feel like this is not our space, even though trans women are women, period. Like,
period.
So Dianic Wicca wasn't really working for me. And I knew I didn't necessarily fit with the Gardnerian or Alexandrian molds of Wicca either. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm eclectic. And I kind of worked as this eclectic Wiccan for quite a while in my practice. And my practice is still very goddess focused. It's still very goddess centered. And I consider myself a devotee of the Dark Mother archetype, which has many faces. You know, the Dark Mother is the great cosmic celestial goddess of darkness. And, you know, she, for me, can be Lilith, and she oftentimes is. She, for me, has came to me as Hecate and the Morrigan and Isis and these different goddesses associated with death and prophecy and war and witchcraft. But I believe that beyond those faces, those masks, there is this much larger cosmic heartbeat that is the Dark Mother, that I believe these goddesses are manifestations of her. And she shows herself in these various forms based upon what the practitioner needs or what the practitioner is asking for. Because I very much believe that as above, so below. I think that there is celestial cosmic energy, and I think that us here on Earth have kind of personified these deities based off of our geographical landscape and our culture and our language, and there's a lot that plays into that. But there still really wasn't much of like a masculine aspect to my practice, right? And I fought with myself for a little while, like, do I need that? And I got to the point where I feel like I didn't. Like, I felt very fulfilled in my practice as a goddess-centered practice, as a self-centered practice with sort of this left-hand path aspect of like apotheosis. And once I started getting into more self-deification in my practice, that started to lead me down the left-hand path sort of route where I was exploring Luciferianism and I was exploring these worlds. I was exploring actually working with the archetype of Satan, like quite literally the biblical Christian devil. And that really didn't necessarily resonate with me either. It felt very blasphemous, which made me feel very powerful. I think that blasphemy is such an intense, beautiful, like empowering thing. I remember reading Jake Richards' book where he talks about the Black baptism and just being like shooketh because that sounded like such a beautiful ritual, even though it's what like the evil witches, quote unquote, did to pact with the devil. I was like, oh my gosh, that really resonates. Like that really resonates. It wasn't really until I read Keldon's book on the Crooked Path where I was really introduced to this traditional witchcraft. And there were parts of it that really resonate with me, and there's still parts of it that don't. In traditional witchcraft, this is where I kind of get reintroduced to the witch's devil. Now, I've made a video already talking about shape-shifting and my first sort of experience with the witch's devil already. So I'm not going to necessarily talk about my very first encounter with the devil in this video, but I will say that it was a completely life-altering event that basically preceded a car accident that I was in, where I literally went flying through the windshield, had a near-death experience. It was very intense, and at the time, I didn't even know who I was meeting in the woods in my dream. I did not even know who that spirit was. I could not even place him whatsoever. So I just thought it was maybe some sort of spirit of the land or something, until later when I realized, looking back, that that was the devil then. And I feel like the witch's devil is very much, you know, the horned god of Wicca. And I know that's controversial to say, but I feel a similar energy from the witch's devil as I do to the horned god of Wicca. I also think that the witch's devil is these pre-Abrahamic pagan gods, like Pan, for example. I think that that's the witch's devil. But I also have found the witch's devil to be the Christian devil. I have found the witch's devil to be Satan. So I kind of feel like the witch's devil, in its pre-Abrahamic aspect, is and appears as these faces of pagan gods. But I also think that the witch's devil can appear very Abrahamically. And I think that it's so much more fluid than I really allowed myself to explore in the masculine. And maybe some of that had to do with my own personal dysmorphia or dysphoria, maybe. But also I just don't know if it was really my taste. And so I think once I kind of met this sort of current of the witch's devil, the man in black, and like kind of seeing him personified with different faces, as opposed to just like this ripped chest, antlered, horned god of like virility and like real satyr-like, which is iconic, and I love it. Okay, don't get me wrong. But I just didn't resonate early in my practice with that. And now I find myself resonating more and more and more with the witch's devil in my practice. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the goddess is still not centered for me. And I feel like she always will, as I'm literally a devotee of the Dark Mother. I have blood right dedication tattoos. So I don't feel like that's changing in any way. And my journey with Apotheosis is becoming a deva of the great goddess incarnate. And so I don't foresee that changing, but working with the witch's devil is definitely radicalizing my practice in so many ways. So like I said, I think that the witch's devil can wear the face of these pre-Abrahamic gods of the wild. And in this traditional witchcraft aspect of breaking it down between the white god and the black god, and like the red god even, and like looking at this based off of, when I say light and dark, I'm speaking light half of the year, dark half of the year, taking it back to like the wheel of the year in a way. And seeing the light god or the white god as like this earthen green man, and seeing the black or dark god as like the lord of the chthonic mound of the dead, and like those sort of cosmic currents manifest in the current of the witch's devil, the red god even. Like, to me, that feels right. And maybe that feels right for now, and maybe that will change later. I don't know. I've been reflecting a lot as I'm leaving my 20s about how my practice has been, and I feel like it has matured a lot over the years, and I feel like there are some things that have changed, and there are some things that have not, right? Like, I don't know, I feel like I sound a little bit like a broken record with that, but having been on YouTube for so long, it's really wild having this catalog and being able to go back and sometimes not even recognizing that young girl making those videos, even though she's me and I'm her. Yeah. Me, the witch's devil is definitely sort of this masculine current, but there's also kind of like this sacred androgen aspect that I feel to the devil. and I can't necessarily explain that. And I know that there are some traditional witches who are much more charismatically academic with their speech than I, who could probably explain it better. But there is a difference between reading about the witch's devil in a book and actually experiencing the witch's devil in ritual. And I was talking with one of my coven mates actually just last night about how some things really can never be broken through the fourth power, because some things you can read about it all you want to, but until you really experience it for yourself, I think that's kind of why they call it like this mystery tradition in a way. And the rituals that I have done with the witch's devil and meeting the devil have been kind of otherworldly and a little bit like ecstatic and like ecstasy, and also like a little bit of fear, and like that really sparks the witch fire within me, and that is really speaking to me. So several years ago, one of my coven mates got these gorgeous statues from our shop. I fell in love with them. It's literally like a Lord and Lady statue set. You may have seen the red goddess that I have on my working altar. I use that for the Dark Mother Current, kind of like a face to represent many different dark goddesses that I work with. But the set also came with the Horned God. And I remember talking like, oh, I just kind of want like the red goddess. Like, is it cheaper if I just get one? No, they come as a set, so I had to get both. And you know, I got a little bit of a discount because like I work at the store and everything, so that was cool. But I kind of really didn't use this god. So this is the statue. You might notice that like he's missing an antler. Also, if you look closer, I literally had to glue him back, and he's like chipped and broken. So there was a time in my practice where this was really not a sacred object for me. No disrespect towards the Horned Lord. I just didn't necessarily feel called in any way, shape, or form. So he actually just kind of like hung out with like my plants for quite a few wheel turns. And then I moved him to sit on top of my china cabinet in like the living room area, dining room, living room sort of area of our house. And one day he fell. He had a fall. And I feel like that was the witch's devil trying to get my attention, to kind of perceive the masculine in a different way than I was. And I felt really bad because he broke. And I was like, oh, that kind of feels like a sign, you know? So yeah, he's missing an antler. I couldn't find it, so he's only got one. And I had to glue his base back on, and he's still chipped. But I put him back together, and I've kind of been using this for now. Maybe I'll get something different later on down the road that speaks more imagery wise with kind of how I perceive the devil. But I feel like this is very symbolic of my relationship with the masculine within me. That has always kind of been a battle, and also the masculine in the divine that I've had this back and forth relationship with, of it doesn't necessarily speak to me, but I still feel drawn to it, but it's not necessarily vibing. I just felt like I hadn't really met or worked with the right masculine current. And I don't think you necessarily have to. Like, by no means am I saying, oh, you have to have a god and goddess in your practice in order for it to be valid. I'm not saying that at all. It just happened to work out for me where I started working with the witch's devil, and the work started working when you work the work. Like, it really started resonating with me. And there's a lot that I could say about the witch's devil, but so much of it is UPG, and so much of it is like just my own personal like practice. And some of it is stuff that I literally cannot even put into words because it's the ecstasy of ritual. And unless you're doing the ritual, or unless you're in the same ritual, I can't explain that. Not because I'm hiding that information, but because it truly is a mystery. And that's a huge part of the craft, in my opinion, is really exploring those inner and outer mysteries. If you would like to see more content about me working with the witch's devil, or maybe more videos about the witch's devil and sort of that queer androgynous aspect to the witch's devil, if you would just like more videos about the witch's devil in general, let me know. I would be happy to make some more content about that. But I wanted to kind of share my own personal sort of spiritual development in my practice, and talk about some of my like Wiccan background, because there's definitely some people I think who have a very sour taste in their mouth when it comes to Wicca. And I understand to a degree, but also you can't really shit on Wicca, but then still call the quarters like a Wiccan, or shit on Wicca, but yet still have huge Wiccan influences in your practice. And I find that with authors and other practitioners, and that's just kind of a pet peeve of mine. Like, you say fuck Wicca, but yet you're still practicing Wicca. Like, be real, be for real, like, be honest with yourself about it, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with having some Wiccan flavor to your practice. And if you really don't want to, then stop including Wicca in your practice. Like, does that make sense? Tonight, I will be live streaming with Daughters of Cain, and we're having a special guest on, and we should be talking about the witches' devils. As you are watching this, it has likely already been filmed. So if you would like to go listen to me and my guest and my co-host on Daughters of Cain, look for our Witches Devil episode and hear from multiple different practitioners of how we feel about working with the devil. I hope that you all are well wherever you are. Blessed be, and I will see you in hell.